All right, so if you have something to write with or write on, we're going to do a little brain dump to start with, just to empty your mind. If you seem to empty it in the first 30 seconds, keep writing for a full 2 minutes, whatever comes to your mind. Make sure that you're breathing as you write. Here we go. Begin. Breathe and just write whatever is on your mind onto paper or onto your computer. 90 seconds. One minute. Breathe. 30 seconds. 15 seconds. Keep breathing, keep writing. And take a deep breath in. For 30 seconds, write down whatever you are feeling physically and emotionally. Physically and emotionally. Begin. 30 seconds. Fifteen seconds. 5 seconds. And take a deep breath in. Now we're going to call conditions out loud. Just name what you're feeling out loud. You can mute yourself so not everybody has to hear everybody. Such as, I feel warm, I feel uncertain. Are we ready? Begin. 30 seconds. I feel uncertain. I feel
Feel motivated.
amused.
I
I feel interested, surprised.
feel
I feel
good.
neutral.
I feel
I feel amused.
tired.
I feel distracted,
But
achy,
I
and
feel
take a deep breath in. Okay.
sparkling.
All right. Take a deep breath in. So everybody mute yourself until there's an opportunity to ask questions or comments, just so I don't get background noise. It's important to be able to identify what you are feeling in the moment through your breath. Inner guidance, intuition is a feeling. It does come in as thoughts, but we're all really good at thinking. Not everybody is as proficient at sensing what that gut feeling is or what that feeling is in your heart. So I recommend that you practice tuning in and just calling conditions throughout your day. Just for a few seconds, I feel crazy, I feel small, I feel whatever it might be with the breath. So I like to take a breath in, notice what I'm feeling, and then express it. Just to review a little bit from last week, we're going to use the four connections to first align and ground ourselves into this space and time. Breath, center, ground, space. Take 3 full breaths. Breathe in and say to yourself, breath, center, ground, space internally, and then exhale. Again, breathe in. Breath, center, ground, space. Release the breath. One more time. Breath, center, ground, and space. Now, it's important that it's not just a mantra, that you are actually expanding your awareness to include your breath, your physical center, your core, the space beneath you, and the space that you are currently in. So when I'm doing breath, center, ground, space, I tend to open my peripheral awareness to take in my space. This is really important because when we get into context of inner guidance and intuition, we're often tuning in and tuning out of our environment, and we want to include it. So I want to make sure that I'm asking the questions such as, what do I need, or what's going on right now in the context of my space. If I close my eyes and I go inward, which is fine, to sense and feel, I still want to have an awareness of my space. Because this process of tuning in is contextual. It's where you are or what situation you might be in at that time. Having said that, you might be in a very active or noisy environment, and that may be difficult to sense. And if that's the case, then you might have to move out of that environment momentarily to find a quieter space to tune in. So we start with the four connections: breath, center, ground, space. Now we go into soften, smile, breathe, and listen. So just breathe in through the nose. I like to breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. As I exhale, it's like a sigh. I'm just releasing that breath, softening my jaw, my tongue, my neck. Soften, smile, breathe, and listen. I'm aware of the quality and intensity of my focus in my eyes, and I want to lighten it, soften it, brighten it just a little bit. I'm aware of that feeling in the core, the central line of my body, physically and emotionally. And I'm just scanning. It's like I'm scanning from head to toe, very gently, just noticing what I feel. Soften, smile, breathe in, listen. And now expand your internal listening to include your space as well. So you have internal and external listening. Breathe. Good. All right. And now we want to go into the heart center. Now that I've connected to myself, I've softened, my energy can flow more easily. I'm going to bring my focus into my heart center and imagine that gate of the heart, or the doorway, however you want to imagine it, is beginning to open. And that allows this light of the soul, light consciousness to come in through the heart, through the blood, into your whole body. So imagine that you're lighting up from the inside, centered in the heart. And just notice how that feels. No judgment, no expectation. You want to listen as neutrally as possible. If you have something that keeps coming into your mind that's interrupting you, write it down. Get it out of your head so that you can get back to the heart in a neutral, open, light state. From here, we can then start asking questions. Last week I gave the 3 primary questions. What do I need or what do I need now? What do I wish to experience? And what do I choose to create? Now, you don't have to ask all three every single time. It could be, what do I need right now? I'm looking for that path to my next step, or uh, I need to look at a situation for some solution of some kind. I'm problem solving, or I'm just not certain about what's going on right now. And there is a difference between asking, what do I need, and what is going on. So what is going on, I would put under what do I need, because that is contextual. Sometimes it's I'm having physical symptoms that I don't understand. Okay, what's going on with me right now? What's going on emotionally? What's going on physically? What's going on psychologically? So I can pose that question, listen, and just wait for a response. Now, as I've mentioned, your response may come in as a feeling in your heart, in your gut, as a sense of knowing in your whole core. It could come in as images, and sometimes as a very quiet sort of thought. It's not going to be the same for everybody. How you perceive it, how you receive it, how you interpret whatever that transmission is, you have to figure out your way, whatever that means to you. So we're asking the questions, what do I need? What's going on? What do I wish to experience? Now, sometimes you'll say, what do I need in terms of a direction for my life? Because a lot of people will reach a point where they're just not certain or clear about what they normally would say should be doing. And it's not about should. That's why we say need. And there's a big difference between the two, because should is connected to someone's agenda. I should be doing this to please mom, or I should be doing this to get a better grade, versus what do I need for my inner fulfillment? What do I need for balanced health, instead of what should I do? So I just want to make that distinction, because we use those words interchangeably, but they do have a big difference. So sometimes we'll say, what do I need? And if I'm not getting an answer, I'm not getting a response of any kind, I usually ask the question 3 times. Okay, I'll pause, I'll breathe, I'll clear myself out again, go back to neutral, pose the question again. What do I need? Breathe and listen and feel. Breathe, listen, feel. Again, if I don't get a clear response, I'm going to ask it one more time. If I ask it 3 times and I'm not getting a clear response, it's time for a new question. And sometimes I'll ask, well, what do I wish to experience? And this can be a broad category in terms of what do I wish to experience today or tomorrow, or what's on my bucket list, or what dream have I always had that I wish to experience? And what I found is, when I start asking and examining that question, I'm going deeper inside. I'm going into my heart more, because it's my heart that wishes to have these experiences, not my mind. The heart connected to the soul, which is animating the body. Now, that's why we want to open the, the heart center to allow that higher soul connection to flow through. So by asking, what do I wish to experience, sometimes I discover what I need next, what I need now. Play with your questions. It's all about I don't want to say the right question, but in essence, it's the right question at that moment to activate a clear response. What do I wish to create? Now, your health is something that you create. Your state of being is something that you create. So if you're feeling anxious and stressed, you can say, I wish to create calm and balance, and I wish to experience being centered and grounded and relaxed. I need to breathe and stand up and feel my feet on the floor in order to feel that experience and create that state. So that's an example of how they can all sort of flow. For me, they flow very freely. In the beginning, asking the questions separately so that you can sense when you're getting a response. Now, you get a response, you get a feeling, you get an image that you were not expecting. And immediately you go, well, that can't be right. What's that about? I don't understand that. You don't understand it in your mind, in your intellect. Because feeling and guidance often does not make sense to our intellect. And so we go to our intellect and we say, well, this doesn't, I don't get it. So I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to brush it aside. And that's something that we all do all the time, more frequently than you are probably aware of. Because we're getting these signals, we're getting these little downloads and transmissions from our greater self all the time, not always paying attention to it. So, trusting that what you're feeling, trusting that what you're seeing in your mind's eye has meaning and value, even though intellectually it may not make sense. For me, excuse me, my biggest challenge was trusting myself. How do I know this is accurate, this feeling that I'm getting? And it took me a while of trial and error, of getting a feeling, getting an image, making a note of it instead of dismissing it, and then coming back later and looking at it in the context of where I was or what question was in my mind. It can be as simple as, you come to a fork in the road. Do I want to take the right fork or the left fork? Take a breath and feel, go with that feeling, see where it takes you. That's an analogy, but I've used that so many times where I've been faced with a choice and it's not clear which way to go. I get a feeling, go make this choice, and I ignore it. And I make a different choice. And the outcome of that choice, most of the time, did not work out in my benefit or in the way that I had hoped it would. Next time I'm faced with a similar choice, I make the choice of going with my feeling. And I see where that takes me. And I can tell you, it's so accurate. I mean, 10 times out of 10, that when I go with that feeling, that gut feeling, the feeling in my heart, I'm always delighted and surprised at how it worked out. It's like, wow, that was the perfect choice. I got what I needed. I discovered what I needed to find in some fashion, or it just worked out. It worked out. So this is a process of observing the moments when you're aware that you have that feeling. Also be aware that you can make one of any multiple choices, even though it may seem like there aren't that many at any given time. Intentionally choose the one where you're making it with your mind, with your intellect, in which you say, I think this is the best choice. And then next time, I feel I'm going to go with that choice. And then make a note so that you can see, you can start to develop a sense of accuracy in that process. Any comments or questions?
I have something to share about this
Please.
very quickly. So there are moments when I hear, when I'm about to do something, I hear "don't do it" voice, but it comes from different places. Sometimes my mind, sometimes my gut.
Yes.
And so to categorically say "don't listen to it" and "listen to it," the trials and errors have been kind of mixed, had mixed reactions. But
Hmm.
sometimes there's not enough time to react to it.
Hmm.
It's like almost in the moment where I'm actually engaging in something.
Yes.
So it's just general question comment where, especially during those times when you don't feel you have choice, does that mean you're not anchored enough in the present moment that you're not
It's
reacting in?
usually what usually happens in that context is we just go to our intellect. We'll not register and acknowledge the feeling, and we'll go to what we think we should do or
Yeah,
what we think it, someone else wants us to do. And this is a challenge in the moment. Um, the best analogy is improvisation, in which things are happening very fast. This is as an actor doing an improv, and you get an impulse, and that impulse translates to an image so quickly. It's a microsecond. Now, in that moment, you can acknowledge it and you can follow it, or you can brush it aside and go to your head and say, what do I think? If you're in a situation where you're having to make a lot of choices like that, someone is asking you for a response, take a breath and just feel first before you respond. You don't have to respond right away. And now this is an interesting thing because some people um, push you for a response immediately.
right,
They're like, hurry up, hurry up. And now you're starting to get all flustered, right? What you have to do is ground yourself and create a boundary where you say, one moment,
right,
I'm going to pause, I'm going to breathe, I'm going to tune in and feel. Let me consider this before I respond. Now, I know, especially like if you're in a group meeting and there are a lot of people and they're all staring at you, waiting for you to respond, it can feel awkward
yeah,
to take that moment. But I have found that people will wait.
right.
You know, it's their frustration that they have to deal with, and that's not a bad thing. Was that helpful?
Very helpful. Thank you.
Good, good. Any other comments or questions?
I have one.
Yeah.
My thought is, how do you differentiate between um when trying to trust yourself between if your thoughts are based in fear
Oh, good question.
versus how if let's say a lot of thoughts are based in fear, how do
Yeah.
you transition from understanding what is a gut feeling versus, and then learning how to trust your gut and knowing that it's not the fear that's leading you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I wanted to get to fear today. Fear is the biggest obstacle in the process of trusting and listening and responding to your inner guidance. Understand that fear is a reaction to a perceived threat of some kind. It's usually mental. We have fearful thoughts, and we react to those thoughts as if they were real and happening now. And we generate that energy of fear and we embody it. It's a charge of energy of fear in our body. If I want to tune in and ask myself a question of inner guidance, I need to discharge the energy out of my body first. That's that waterfall image of energy flowing down through the body, out through the feet, with the breath, being very gentle and kind. Gentleness counterbalances fear. And it's hard to be gentle when you're afraid because it makes you tight. Sometimes I will place one hand on my chest, one on my belly, and I'll breathe, and I will soothe myself as if I am an infant. And if you've ever held a baby and soothed the baby when they were upset, you know that you can't be upset and soothe the baby at the same time. You have to be grounded. You have to be calm. And so this is about you addressing self, acknowledging the fear that's present or the upset or the stress, and then guiding you into a calmer, more grounded state. If you need to talk to yourself as if you are that child, by all means, that can be very effective. So now you've discharged that energy out. You now have to shift out of the fearful thoughts and narratives. And that's where breath, center, ground, space comes in. If I shift my attention completely to being present now in my body, I am no longer focusing on the fearful thoughts or fearful narratives, and therefore I'm not reacting fearfully and generating fear as a charge in my body. Okay? It's a challenge depending upon the intensity of the fear. And a mild degree of fear can be kind of exciting and stimulating. Moderate amount of fear tends to create tension and resistance, and extreme fear can be paralyzing. And when you're in the extreme state of paralysis, your mind freezes as well. You can't think. So this is where you have to break up that tension, that rigidity that fear creates with movement. And the basic movement is breathing, breathing deeply. I mean, really breathing deeply and get that diaphragm activated and the body moving so that you can set that energy into motion, direct the energy down and out into the ground. Cleanse your body of the charge of fear. Once you're at that point, it's easier to think and to observe. And you might realize that as soon as you emptied that charge, you focused again on your fearful thoughts and narratives. And now the cycle repeats. Are you with me so far? Okay? So this is a strategy of emptying the vessel first and then shifting out of that dimension. I'm going to call it a dimension of whatever that narrative was, whatever those fearful thoughts were, and come into this dimension of the present space-time with a clear intention of being grounded, centered, and fluidly present. I have that stream, that waterfall flowing through. I'm aware of breathing, moment to moment, breath to breath. Things are moving. Things are moving. If a little bit of fear comes in, I just pour it into the stream. Down and out it goes. Clear? So we create dimensions. We call them timelines. And we do it with thought first. We have a thought. And then we elaborate on the thought and we start to create an energetic vessel, a shape, a structure that we then begin to feed with our focus and our feelings. And if we continue to feed it, it gathers energy and it begins to form its own gravity that attracts all the elements that it needs to create and manifest as a reality. So I'm working with somebody yesterday and they kept having the fearful thoughts of being sick, of getting sick. And I had to point out to them, every time that you entertain that thought, you feed it, you feed that timeline, and the probability of getting sick becomes greater. So now you need to shift out of that. And the way that I would get them to do it is to just come back to your breath, come back to your center, feel and listen. But the mind is just so facile and quick, it'll come here, then it'll bounce right back out again. So I was going to give this tool in tools and practices, but I think it's appropriate now. When you've created a timeline that you do not want to manifest as reality or experience, you must collapse it. You must shut it down. Okay? And you can imagine this like a timeline is a tunnel that you start digging, and then it opens up into a completely different reality once you break through that. I want to close down the tunnel. I want to collapse it. And I use a hand gesture, a symbolic gesture to do that. My right hand is above my left. I slap it, I flip it over, and I slice it in half. So down, over, slice. Clear? That is what I do when I become aware that I am focusing on a fearful thought, narrative, or timeline. Because we've all created them. We've all created our worst case scenarios thinking that it's going to help us be prepared, but it doesn't. But once you create these, they are there for all time. The question or the issue is, do you want to keep visiting that space that you've created? And if you don't, you need to collapse it. You need to cut access off. And so there are days when I'm walking down the street and one of those fearful narratives comes in and I'm just, you're out. I'm not going there. And I use the hand gesture because it's a clear symbol to my body and my nervous system. Another hand symbol that I use is to discharge stress out of my body or fear out of my body. and it's just this, okay? And I'm usually doing it from around my solar plexus or my heart. So if that fear feeling comes in, I'm shooting it out of my body, and I imagine it going shoom, right down into the ground. All right, so between those two little practices, little tools, collapsing and cutting off access to the narrative, to the timeline, and shooting that fear out of the body right away. It's a delicate process to get to neutral where you can listen and feel clearly. Now, I talked about the interference field before, which is all that noise, all of that stimuli that we're subject to all the time. What I'm hearing from my clients as of late, and what I've noticed is everyone's stressing out because they're watching the news. And the news really has become digital terrorism. I don't care what side or what channel you're watching, it is designed to keep us in a constant state of fear. Why is that? Because it's easier to control and manipulate somebody who is afraid versus somebody who has access to their clear inner guidance. So my recommendation is stop watching the news. I did. The day after the election, I stopped watching the news. And I feel so much calmer. My nervous system is not vibrating all the time. If there's something that I really need to know, I'll find it. I'll figure it out, or I'll hear it from someplace. But I found that was a big influence, that once I took that off the board, I was able to be calmer throughout the day, and I'm able to tune in and find that neutral space much faster. I want you to think of your inner guidance kind of like your board of directors or your inner council. And I used to teach it starting with the head, the heart, and the gut. You have to be able to observe with your mind without judgment or expectation. Listen through your heart and trust your gut. Observe with a mind without judgment or expectation is a huge challenge. Listening through the heart, breath to breath. The fluid state is regulated with breathing. If my breathing is erratic, my fluid state becomes erratic. If my breathing is consistent, then I can maintain that fluid, relaxed, soft state. And then learning to trust the gut. Okay, now we can go further and say that our expanded inner council or board of directors would include all of the chakras. The crown, the third eye, the throat, the heart, the solar plexus, the belly, the root. I include the dantian in between the root and the belly. Each of these energy centers is a dimension of perception and experience. And if you just tune in and listen, I like to place my hands on top or in front of the chakra while I'm breathing and just tuning in. What am I feeling here? What do I sense here? The more connected and aligned and gently activated all of your chakras are, the more sensitive and detailed the information that you receive. So it's about listening with your whole being, your whole body, not just with your ears or just with your heart or just with your gut. I find it helpful to get information from all of my counsel before I make a choice. The trickiest part is the mind, because the mind wants to interpret based upon the past. We're always judging what's happening now with what we have experienced in the past. And we're comparing it, which is a way of using memory to protect ourselves. So, if I put my hand on the hot stove, I'm going to remember that. But every time I approach the stove, that memory comes up. Now I'm filtering the present through my past experience. Well, we do that in many subtle ways all the time. Is this something I'm familiar with? Have I experienced this? How did that experience go? Inner guidance is about the present. And sometimes what you are receiving has no reference to your past experience. It's new. You're in a new situation. You have never been in this situation before. It is not familiar. It's not a well-trodden path that you've gone back and forth on many times. This is all new. Look, we are moving into a new paradigm, a new frequency of reality. This is what is happening all over the planet. It's manifesting and presenting as rapid change and chaos, or at least that's the way the media would like to portray it. Okay? It's because we're moving up, we're ascending in our consciousness. And this is especially why it's important to have a sense of inner guidance. Your higher mind of your soul consciousness sees much more than we can see in our 3 dimensions. And that soul is constantly trying to guide with feeling and sensation information so that we can navigate this new territory that we are entering. And it is new territory. Just talk to anybody. They'll say, I've never experienced this before. I've never seen this before. This has never happened before. It's really important to acknowledge that and to accept that that is where we are now. Having said that, the tendency, after you've compared it to the past and it doesn't have a clear reference, is to now attempt to project future and say, well, what could this turn out to be? And again, this is what happens frequently in the media. The media is always projecting about the worst case scenario in the near or distant future, which creates this massive mass fragmentation of mind from body, in which millions of people are now focusing on these what-if scenarios of the future. They're no longer connected to themselves. They can't listen to themselves. And most of them are just too stressed out to even think. So the tendency to focus on future, again, is an attempt to protect ourselves, to prepare ourselves for the what-if scenario. It doesn't work. It's not going to work. The future is not. The present is what and where we are. We're creating the future right now. Think of the present and the future as one and the same. It's right now. And now you're not fragmenting mentally into the void space. You are here. And when you are here in the present and sensing it, you will begin to expand your awareness of the near future and sometimes the distant future. You may have premonitions. You may have, a precognition of how something's going to work out. It is a probability based upon a given trajectory or a timeline. If everything keeps working the way it's going, yeah, it's probably going to work out like this. Okay? Timelines are created so quickly, they just branch out all the time. And if you shift between them, you're going to get a different probable outcome depending on what timeline you're in. I hope this is not too confusing. It all relates to the inner guidance, especially when we're saying, what do I need now? Or where am I going? Or what is happening? That is contextual within a given time frame or timeline based upon a dimensional space that we all create with our mind, such as, I hope this doesn't happen. I hope this does happen. Okay, you've just created two probable timelines with that statement and that thought. Which one would you prefer to experience? I want to go with what I hope is going to happen. And so now I'm going to invest my focus, my intention, and my emotional energy into that. And that is how I create it. It's very subtle. But now, once I'm in that timeline, I can sense probable outcomes in the near and or distant future, as long as it keeps flowing in that direction. They branch off and they change all the time. And this is why we got to tune in frequently and go, all right, where am I now? Is this timeline still heading in the direction that I intended it to go, or have I been diverted and distracted by other things? I mean, we make plans of how we want things to go. And sometimes they go according to plan, sometimes almost to plan. A lot of times, not as planned at all. Other elements have come in to affect that trajectory and alter it, change it. That's the unpredictability of the present and free will. Our free will can change any timeline. Go back to breath, center, ground, space. Soften, smile, breathe and listen. Open the heart center. If there's fear right now, acknowledge where it's coming from. If you need to collapse a timeline and close that down, do so. If you need to shoot some of that energy out of your body, out of your solar plexus, do that. Then come back to the heart again and see where you are. Ground and center without judgment or expectation in the present, so that you can sense and feel what is present, which is often very different than what you think. It's not what you think. It's what you feel and what you resonate with. That's the core of it. My inner guidance kept telling me, it's not what you think. It's not what you think. And it took me quite some time to realize my habit of thinking. And finally, I'm like, well, okay, if it's not what do I think, what am I supposed to do? Just listen, just feel. And then you'll start to understand it. It does require that you create some quiet space, a time every day. I do it first thing in the morning. I get up and I write. as soon as I get up, just to empty my mind, what happened in my dream state, what did I learn, whatever. Where am I right now? What am I feeling? Now I go through my process. What do I need? What do I need to know today? Is there anything that I need to be aware of? Or how shall I approach this situation that I have later today? Or how should I deal with this person I know I'm going to see today? And I just breathe and I tune in and I feel. In time and with practice, you will develop a clearer sense, an impulse of that guidance. I do it when I'm at my computer. So when I get a feeling, I start to write it out. And this I have found very helpful because then I can go back and look at it later. But also, as I'm writing it out, it turns into a dialogue. I'm having a dialogue with myself, with my greater soul self. And I'm asking a question and I'm getting a response. And that could go on for page after page. And the information that I get sometimes, I was not expecting at all. And I look at it and I go, I can't believe that I wrote that. It's like, wow. And I've heard writers say that. Writers will sit down and begin writing and then they'll look at it and they'll go, well, I don't feel like that came from me, not from my smaller self. That came from my larger self. And that's where we want to go. I think Emery brought up a good point, about distinguishing between the inner dialogue of the mind that says don't do it versus the gut that says don't do it. And you have to learn how to turn off your thought and just drop into the belly. And I think taking that pause to breathe into the belly, to feel that clearly helps. When you're really listening, like when you're really listening to a piece of music, observe how much you're thinking. When you're humming or toning, just hum, it's really hard to think. And I found those little tools help me to turn off my brain momentarily. I hum a lot as well. If I want to tune in and feel, I start humming for a few minutes. And then observing. And what's interesting is I start getting images, clear images, that are not the result of my intellect. All right, I think that's good for today. If you don't have any comments or questions, we'll wrap it up.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I
All
just,
right.
Ron,
Yes.
I just have a comment because I wrote down inner guidance, and then I realized it's a dance in the inner guidance, and I really like that.
It's a
That
dance.
play. Yeah, because I wrote down inner guidance
Mhm.
and the word guidance,
Dance.
the dance. Yeah, and
Yeah. Oh,
I
that's
just really
great.
liked it, and I liked it really, this playful
That's
element.
great. Thank you for that. Thank you. That's a wonderful way to look at it. It's a dance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ron.
Take care.
Bye-bye.